All right, so the story of recording artist Kiprich being charged for the use of audio-visual or audiovisual communication to promote criminal activity making the rounds. We're asking lawyers at the criminal bar, Pierre Rogers, and entertainment lawyer Ronald Young to help us understand the act, the charge, and the possible consequences, and just this whole situation. Gentlemen, good morning. Pierre's on set.
Good morning.
Ronnie is in the darkness on Zoom.
I'm sorry. Good morning. Sorry, it's a little dark here.
Yes. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. Pierre, let me start with you since you're here. Your take on this matter?
So, the act itself is an old act. This particular section, which treats with audiovisual material, is something which is relatively new. That is to say, it came about round about 2017, 2018. We are seeing it being used now, and we are seeing it being used, I would dare say, in the manner that it was contemplated when it was framed.
When was it framed?
The act itself is an old act. The Offences Against the Persons Act. Very old. But the inclusion of this section is relatively recent, 2017, 2018. So,
and the act states that, before we go to Ronnie.
So the act itself criminalizes, and perhaps for the first time in our country, certain utterances, certain publications, and it does it in such a way that it attempts to protect the rights of minority persons or persons who are targeted by way of these kinds of publications. Mm-hmm. Music, it is so wide that it includes writing, any kind of digital publication which encourages criminal activity or which threatens certain sectors of society.
Yeah. Ronnie, it's pretty new to us here in Jamaica, but in the US, I can name at least 10 rappers who have been charged because of lyrical content, and in fact, it's something that musicians like John Legend and so on are still now advocating that it affects freedom of speech. But prosecutors have successfully charged and sent away rappers in the U.S. for using
the law there has also affected some of our artists here.
I think so.
From 19 all along.
I think so. So is it that we're just catching up to our U.S. counterparts?
Yeah, I think we are just catching up to our U.S. counterparts. But one of the things that I wanted to say is that I think the police force in Jamaica needs to be very careful in terms of how they're enforcing this legislation to ensure that it's not enforced in a way which is self-serving or deemed to be hypocritical. And I say that, for example, because for many, many years, some artists have been singing, like from a volatile community, have been talking about killing persons from a rival community. And I haven't seen where there's been any enforcement of the law in that respect. I've seen where there are certain artists who are threatening, violence and non-consensual acts against women. And I've not seen a lot of the enforcement of the law there. I can't recall of an incident I've seen where, of course, and I mentioned in an article recently, the gay community, whether persons agree with their lifestyle or not, they have been the subject of attacks many, many years in songs that I've not seen where the law has been enforced in a way in which, as you say, may have been enforced in the United States. So the question is, in this instance now, the law is enforced, they're enforcing the law when there is an alleged attack against the police. And it's a question of optics. Are you only enforcing it because it's against the police, or are you going to be meting out this type of enforcement across the board? And it's an important question, along with the question of freedom of speech and the importance of artists being able to express their creativity without sanction.
That balancing act sounds like a balancing act that cannot balance, Pierre.
May I?
That's a lot of gray areas.
So the truth is this. I take Ronald's point, and there is merit to his observations. But I'd want to point out what I think are relevant considerations when weighing his argument. Any criminal process is driven by a complainant who lays a complaint, and thereafter there is an investigation and charge. That is straight across the board.
You're saying the police is the complainant?
In this instance, it is the police who are the complainant. The law, as it stands, is not one which is popular, it is not well known. And in any event, some of the sectors who have or who would be in a position to lay a complaint, the gay community as cited by Ronald, I think it's a little bit difficult to contemplate somebody going into a station in Jamaica society to lay a complaint which is going to be investigated. Additionally,
with respect to that community.
With respect to that community. So there is that. It is complaint driven. The police are in a position to drive their own complaints because they too can lay complaints. But I mean, right across the board, I can think of several sectors who may be interested in laying a complaint, but who may be hesitant about doing that, who would initiate the process for investigation and charge in those circumstances. Additionally, the Act itself is very specific. The Act speaks about, and this is perhaps by way of a nod to Ronald, who has indicated that the Act hampers or fetters artists. The Act is very specific, and in so doing, it clearly limits the persons who can be charged, because it is not every utterance or every violent utterance that is going to be prosecutable. Somebody getting up on stage and quote-unquote bigging up the Don man in his area, there's nothing wrong with that under the Act. What the Act criminalizes is encouraging any action, any criminal activity on the part of a criminal organization, or alternatively,
violence.
Threatening violence, the threat of death, inciting death. In practical terms, that limits persons who can be prosecuted, if you understand what it is that I say.
If we think back, though, as Harris was saying, about this catch-up argument, I mean, there have been so many songs that have targeted the gay community that some folks would say have incited attacks. It's not the first time that there would have been an attack on the police, Ronnie. And we've heard artists encourage that before. So are we slippery sloping? Like, do we have this right? Does it need wordsmithing? Does it need refining? Does it need some more what's going on?
Yeah, I have in fact used I've used that exact term about the slippery slope. And so I think and just to follow on from what Perry is saying, and I defer to him on the criminal law elements, absolutely. But from an entertainment law perspective, yes, and a freedom of speech perspective, it can be a slippery slope in that where I think we need to do is to look very carefully, and I don't represent Kiprich, and I haven't examined the lyrics of his particular song in detail, but we have to be careful about looking careful, and police do have to be careful about looking at the wording, and certainly anybody who's defending an artist would be looking very carefully at the wording of the song, the intent, although intent may not be a big factor in terms of this law, but certainly looking at how the song was developed, what were the words used, and so on. And in general, we need to be careful that we don't say one person cannot have freedom of speech, but we're okay when another person has it. Freedom of speech is about allowing persons who you may not agree with and may not like some of the things that they're saying, to be able to say them when it doesn't raise to the level, like Pierre is saying, of violence, direct threats of violence against a particular society or community, not just the police, in my view.
Yeah. I was saying to Simone that Kiprich is not the only artist, in my knowledge, that's been charged. There's another artist, I don't remember his name, but there was an incident where a policeman was hit. He was on the road, traffic cop.
I remember that.
And then there was a song that spoke to police, with a speed gun, move out of the way or mega lick you down. And they had charged him as well because it was following up on that. So I want to ask Pierre, with freedoms come responsibility. And so there is freedom of speech, but does an act such as this create the perimeters for responsibility? So
my position is this. We live in a society. Our society numbers over 3 million. You're going to have diverse interests. Persons have certain freedoms. Any move to limit those freedoms must, to my mind, and indeed the case law speaks about it, must be justifiable in the circumstances. And by justifiable, we mean the exercise of rights which do not adversely affect other persons' rights. This instance makes it clear what the law is attempting to do is to protect the ultimate right, the right to life. Because the section limits only in circumstances where criminal activity or threat to life is concerned. I don't think you need a bigger justification than that.
So you're fine with what has happened to Kiprich?
So the truth is, Kiprich's matter. I haven't listened to the material, and I'd hate to comment on anything that is presently before the courts. But my own position is that, and don't get me wrong, I am uncomfortable with any inroads against established rights.
Gotcha.
I don't believe that it is something that needs to be that should be interfered with. However, it is clear in certain circumstances that those rights may pose dangers to other persons, and in those circumstances we have no choice.
Ron, your thoughts? Are we precedent setting here?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I am very much in favor of artists' freedom of creativity, but I've said publicly very recently that artists need to be ensured that they are creative. So, for example, I gave the example of A Welcome to Jamrock by Damian Marley, where he's speaking about the harsh reality of Jamaican life and somewhat violent reality of Jamaican life. But it's done in a creative way where it's not an advocation of violence towards any group. And that's different than just writing a song that says, hey, let's go out and kill these people. Not only is it, again, possibly offensive to the law, but it's not creative. And so artists do have a responsibility, though I believe in their freedom of expression, to be responsible in how they are putting out their work to the public and how it may influence the younger generation who may be impressionable. I think there's still a responsibility there.
Yeah. Pierre, one of the arguments is that Kiprich's recording was made for an overseas client, that its purpose was not for local consumption by music people. Is that a fair argument as it relates to...
You are attempting to elicit my opinion on a matter that is before the court.
Okay.
Having said that, though, my own position, without knowing anything about the case, is that digital material is international. It knows no boundaries.
Right.
I am not sure how much of a defense that would be, if it were a defense at all. But like I said, I'm not going to discuss the case because I don't know the details and it's presented before the courts.
Yeah, we have to go. Is this where all the artists now stand up and take note, Ronnie? Will this change things in the industry, you think?
Yeah, I think it may, put in the minds of artists, look, I just need to be a little bit more creative, a little bit more responsible in how I'm putting forward my lyrics. But I hope it doesn't stifle the important creativity of opinions and speaking about the inner city and speaking about the trials of whether it be poverty or violence in their communities, because that is a very important part of Jamaican artistry, and it's important for that to be seen by the world.
Is this where now the mentorship with the artists who are established come in to teach the younger ones how to frame and how to, you know what I mean? Because there's a trend now, a wave now, that the more outright it is the better you are as an artist. And so this is where the mentorship and the training comes in. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Great discussion. Lawyer at the criminal bar, Pierre Rogers, and Delia, schoolmate. You didn't know that? He told me a lot of stories, but I can't tell you them on air.
I get quite a guess.
Okay, an entertainment lawyer, Ronald Young.
Discussing the importance of managing digital legacies. That's what we have after the break. Please stay with us.